come and see. Come and see, come and see, come and see. You wanna be, you wanna be, you wanna be. You wanna be in the light. Come and see, come and see, come and see. Come and see, come and see, come and see. You wanna be, wanna be, wanna be. You wanna be the light. But don't you wanna be? But don't you wanna be the light?
Well, hello everybody.
Hi.
We're glad you're with us today. We're excited to be talking about a subject. I don't even really want to, it's not a topic. It's a subject that we interact with every single day. And we know that you guys are interested in this too. And we're going to talk about channeling. What is it? Where does it come from? How does it work? And how you get to be your own channeler. So, yeah, get your coffee or cup of tea.
Wrap up in your blankie. It's a little bit chilly over here in the States and where we are in Oklahoma.
I know, but
It's December. We're coming up on the solstice.
so
Next
excited for the
week.
solstice.
We are so excited.
It's definitely a time that we like to honor by being out in nature.
It's so beautiful. Last year, this is a funny story because I was thinking about this yesterday when we were talking about what our solstice plans were.
Yes.
And last year, the solstice was at 4 a.m. It was at 4:44.
It was at 4:44.
Which was really magical. And so we
Oh my God.
went out on this beautiful land in Oklahoma.
Our friend, our sister, our soul sister, is so awesome and has this beautiful,
Oh my God.
beautiful magical spot. We have vectored there. We have done our own,
We've had all
ceremony.
kinds of interesting experiences and communication with all types of beings. And
Well, let's just say, I think it's just plenty accurate and fair to say that we've opened a number of portals out there.
yes.
We've been able to interact with lots of beautiful extra dimensional beings out there. So it was really our good fortune. We were blessed by being able to go out there last year, that we just felt really drawn to doing it. Like, we need to be out there at this time. It was conveyed to us through
a dream.
a dream.
Yes, that's right.
A dream.
It was conveyed through a dream that we had to be out there at 4:44.
So you guys know by now that Melissa does not operate very well at any temperature below 75 degrees. That's not really fair to say. She operates just fine, but she needs the warm climates. So this was like a really big deal. And I wanted to make it as comfortable for her as possible. And I went out and purchased these portable propane heaters. And let's just say we're not in an enclosed space. We're out literally in a grassy field surrounded by cedar trees on the far perimeter of the area that we're in, trying to set the scene for you. A lot of native grasses, and just circling this big area are all the cedar trees, some post oaks. So it's not like there's really that much protection from the wind and the elements. But I thought, you know what? It's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. And we're going to put it out there. And we bundled up. I couldn't even tell you how many layers of socks, tights.
It was, single digits.
It was, I think, below.
The wind chill.
It was
if you
below
all
zero.
don't know about the Oklahoma wind chill, like, we may not get the cold temperatures, but we're in the plains here. I mean, the wind chill can be easily in the negative.
It's brutal. It can be brutal.
Negative degrees.
But it was very invigorating. By the time we
Well,
were
yeah.
done with ceremony,
I look over and Marilyn, and what's so funny is that I'm the one that doesn't like the cold, and I was actually quite toasty. I was like all my face was
part
in
of
my sleeping bag.
Let's just say part of my problem was the fact that all of my layers, I was literally Ralphie's younger brother in A Christmas Story. I was so layered up, and I had my Gore-Tex on, and I had all this stuff on, and I had my mucklucks on, that I could not fit in my sleeping bag properly. Let's just call it out. It's like trying to stuff, a bunch of sausage and some casing that was a bit too tight. And I get the zipper only partially way up my hip. And I can't go any further, and I can't reach because my arms are immobilized because I'm so layered up. So I wasn't as protected in some ways, even though I had blankets. I mean, so here we are out in the field. We're freezing, and yet there was so much magic that was happening.
We were deep in meditation.
Like not there, and that's probably part of the reason why we
deep
could
in connection and our inner work that was happening. We were in there was an interdimensional time shift. We were like, what day is it? What time is it? Where have I been?
Literally.
How long have I been gone? And I look up, and Marilyn literally has freaking icicles hanging off of her face. This is no lie. I'm not exaggerating for the first time in my life. And I was
like,
dead.
damn. That's cold. That's some cold shit right there. I don't think I'd ever been that cold. I turned into a
How
popsicle.
dedicated are you all to the solstice, okay?
Are you prepared?
Are you willing to get frostbite?
I did not think that I would ever get warm again. And you know me. I'm like, I am wearing a t-shirt in 30-degree weather. I did not know that I would ever obtain proper thawage and a warm body temperature again.
And then we went and had breakfast.
And it was awesome. It was so good.
At our favorite breakfast joint.
It was. It was beautiful.
It was
and we
so
were
magical.
riding such a high. So guess what? Here we are. We're a week away from the winter solstice. And we hope you guys had a great solstice and whatever way. I mean, anytime you're listening to this, it's the now moment. But this is where we are right now for us. And we are very much looking forward to being in that potent moment.
The winter solstice is really something that I connect with more than any other time because it's such a beautiful time of reflecting on the year and to really think about your life and what you've accomplished, what you would like to change in the new year. Lots of time for reflection and processing and clearing and releasing that which no longer serves, and also of just paying attention also to all the things that you do love and the things that you're proud of. I'm really, really excited about 2018. Energetically, I feel like something is really shifting. I know maybe
we were definitely in the thick of it this last year because I think I
thought 2017 was interesting.
It was interesting. We knew, I mean, if you were kind of tapped in and paying attention or were in that realm of reading and receiving some information and reading the field, we knew this was going to be a challenging year of great opportunities for expansion on the individual level and on the collective
and
level.
Releasing.
And it's been a year of reckoning. It has been a year of reckoning and revolution and
yet I have felt very inward this year on a personal level. I have felt very introverted, very cocooned, very I've spent a lot of time with myself and by myself this year. And I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I definitely, because I've been gone. I've taken my little trips by myself. I felt called to really that the importance of me being absolutely by myself. I mean, I don't mind. You know me. I'm a social person. I interact with people. Whatever.
I know you are.
I needed to be alone, and I'm really grateful because I do have a place I get a retreat to now and then that I don't have to go very far away. And I don't ever think about getting in the car and driving hundreds of miles by myself. So, and it sure seems like I'm just looking at our own little circle of people that, we are a part of their lives and they're a part of ours. Mm-hmm. That I think that this has been something that we've all felt the need to do that. The introspection of having such expansion, and we've got to recalibrate. And for me, you were talking about the winter solstice and what the significance of it is for you. And I would say for me, maybe it's just because I'm tapped into the old time way, right? Maybe it's such a part of my genetic makeup that I can't deny.
Hold on. I forgot what your Wiccan name was.
Well, I can't really give that out. I don't know why you're asking me that. It's not like I don't tell just anybody that name.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. It's all right, If I'm going into there, I need my holy vestiges on, my hooded cloak.
Maybe that's why I was dreaming about that this morning.
Except it was more of a cape.
A hooded cape.
Kind of like a maestro. When I'm wanting something more, Claire from Outlander cape, but black. Maybe a dark cloak. Okay, whatever.
I think it's funny because, well, anyway, we were talking about hooded cloaked figures, and yet you yourself
I want to be
a hooded cloaked
and yet
figure.
I don't trust them when they come to me.
All of a sudden, I'm wondering if these hooded cloaked figures that appear to you are you.
I don't. It doesn't feel like me. It feels like somebody else.
I don't know. If you ran into yourself, would it feel like you? If it's another version of you? Supposedly, I've run into versions of myself, and I don't know that I could identify them.
You'd like to think that we would have some sort of vibrational resonance, like something would trigger, like, oh, hey, but aren't we? Aren't we all each other, on some level?
Yes. Oh, this just got deep.
It just got real deep.
There's no...
So deep.
Okay, getting back to your solstice rituals. I'm sorry.
I think, Melissa, you're somewhat intrigued by the fact that I was practicing witch for many years.
I am.
I am. But I was a solitary.
You can see my face right now. I'm like, yes.
I was a solitary practitioner. I did pop in and out of a coven here and there, local coven.
I know you
because
so
people
well that
want the camaraderie.
I like to hear tales of times, things that I had no idea that you were doing. It's always intriguing me. Like when you talk about your possum research. And you just throw it out there so casually, like everybody knows about that. I'm like, what?
When I was...
Or when you worked at the radio show. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I love that.
I was listened to by so many farmers in their tractors. I would give the daily ag report, and people were glued to me, okay?
I have no doubt.
And then I would spend, an Alan Jackson 45. We have completely digressed. We were over here talking about the winter solstice, and we ended up talking about an ag report. Back to the winter solstice, and my old ways is what I think it really started tipping and going down the scenic bypass route, is that it is the longest night, right? And that's why we have these lights that we are honoring that longest night by, whether it was a fire back in the day or candles or just having the illumination that we have to be the light, we have to make the light, we have to do these things. And this is a reminder of that time period that I think we all are embarking upon, seasonally speaking, of going within, of being down within and really looking at ourselves, looking within and seeing that light and being that light. But you kind of got to go across the river Styx during that darkness. So we're going to get to go out into the country and be outside. This year we get the solstice after the sun's come up, so that'll be nice.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, hallelujah. Sun will be up, and it'll be magical, and I'm excited. You were talking about how deep we had gotten last year. And, I mean, the fact of the matter is we get deep every time we have a session with a client, and we're doing a Reiki Rock session. We can get very deep when we're vectoring, of course, right? And in those moments when we're having that, interfacing happening, we have access to all this other information, and it comes through. That is channeled information. Channeling would be a non-physical energy, an entity or a collective or an element or whatever, something that is not necessarily physical, that is communicating through a physical being.
Everybody channels information all the time. Every single person on this planet can channel information and does.
Exactly.
Whether you realize it or not.
There you go. I think it's all about like the terms and thinking about it. Because I think when most people think about channelers, they're probably imagining a trance channeler, somebody who their consciousness steps aside. They go into kind of a dreamlike state, or their consciousness is in another... I don't really want to say it's in a container because I don't really like that, but it's set aside. And the non-physical energy entity that comes through has taken over physical control of the body, meaning that person can get up and walk around the room, or they can be taken to the bathroom, or they can get a drink of water, and they don't even know that they're doing it. And typically, with people who are doing trance channeling, their voice may change, and we're going to get into more of that later. But I think that's what people typically think about, that as channeled information, or the conscious channeler who is just interfacing and communicating information from, once again, a non-physical energy entity. This type of relationship has existed since the beginning of humans on Earth.
Well, going back to some of the conversations that we've already had about intuition and intuitive skills, as human beings, we are multidimensional beings. If you look at children coming into this world, we know that we have access to all kinds of different dimensions at all times. And yet, through our programming and interactions with other people, either through being told that something's not real, being invalidated, or having to focus on the, quote, real world.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's been the case. And so now we have this whole new generation. I think about my own youngest daughter.
Right.
And I think about how she would go on and on when she was like 2, 3 years old, talking about her life in China, how she wanted to take me home, take me back to my home in China, and had all of this vivid memory detail, talked about her family, talked about this, talked about all kinds of things in other environments that would have been squelched.
I always knew that there weren't such a thing as imaginary friends.
Oh,
These people, I mean,
Who are you to decide who's real and not real? That's what I used to think when I was a kid. Like, wait a minute. I'm talking to this person. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. And you and I were talking about this. Oh, if it happened in the Bible, if Moses is talking to a burning bush, Ezekiel is seeing UFOs, if there are these prophets, right?
Well, they get put on a pedestal for having these special, unique gifts.
Thank God we don't live during the time of Joan of Arc, or even Nostradamus. Other people who were channeling information and who were vilified. Well, Nostradamus not so much, because he was very clever. He was very smart in how he laid his quote-unquote prophecies out there. But Joan of Arc, what happened to her? And we know in all the sacred texts that there was all kinds of channeled information. Oh, Noah, you're getting these visions, you're getting these downloads of information that God is giving to you. And nobody is calling that channeling. But that's exactly what Noah did. He was saying, I've had a vision, God's given me, well, we'd call that a download, from all that is. You're being told how to build it, how to do it. who to get to take on board. And Noah wasn't the first person to have divine information given to him about a massive catastrophic flood. All of these major civilizations across time and space have used quote-unquote seers, people who are connecting with the divine, people who are bringing forth information from other sources that are not physical. So it's really the labels that we're putting on it. And I think those were special people. Not everybody could do that. And if you claimed you could do that, well, you could get run out of town on a rail because it would be blasphemy, right? You're not the anointed one. I didn't say you could have those visions. I mean, I go back to thinking about Saint Hildegard.
I know.
Saint Hildegard was channeling information. She was channeling information and music. And we know that music...
Saint Hildegard was channeling in one of the most magical ways. Yeah. If you can have 5 sense visions, you're physically in another dimension.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know how you would be able to differentiate.
You couldn't between what reality and another reality. And of course, there is the contingent of people that be like, well, that's called mental illness. And she had schizophrenia.
Well, the Pope didn't think so.
No, he agreed. Thank God. Her team stepped in and been like, yo, Pope, give her the okay. And he's like, I deem these visions to be true. Yes, thanks, Pope. Thank you for validating it. But if you didn't have that, you ended up like Joan of Arc. So people have been a conduit of this information. And as with all things, it is up to us, the people that are listening to that information, to discern what resonates, what doesn't resonate. And we're gonna kind of get into that a little bit later on in the show. But I don't think we mentioned this. A lot of channelers back in the day would be referred to as mediums, and this
psychic mediums.
Right, psychic mediums. I get the term. You're acting as a go-between, but you're kind of not. It depends on what type of channeler you are, first of all. And of course, you have to know when people are channeling information about future events, i.e. like Nostradamus, even Edgar Cayce. I mean, there's been a number of people that are going to claim to have visions from future probabilities, but that's the thing. It's that it's not a for fact deal. And every Nostradamus gets pulled out. I'm sure he's literally saying, stop including me with your shows about my predictions because y'all got it all wrong. You know, I mean, you cannot predict the future.
And having said that, I think that...
Oh, you can see probabilities.
I think that he was very tapped into a probable reality that very well could have happened.
Right. But other things happen and things get moved around and they shift.
But did they shift because of Nostradamus' predictions?
Did they? And people are doing
Did he change
But most
the future?
people like to go back and lay it into their own personal framework. I mean, I just think about all the Nazi stuff. You know, they always pull him out that he predicted the Nazis and JFK, maybe Abraham Lincoln's assassination. So we've mentioned a few historical figures that have been channelers. For most people, I think modern day channeling was really a big push from Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet.
This is the early 1900s.
Edgar Cayce was kind of like the most well-known. And like I said, people didn't necessarily call him, they weren't calling him a channeler, per se, as a prophet. With most people who end up being trance channelers, they're over here doing something else, and the consciousness of that entity or that collective entity is coming through. And he would bring forth, I don't want to say as a surprise, but it's not intentionally sought after. Let me leave it at that. Right?
Let's just say agreements are made.
Agreements are made on a higher level.
You know,
the conscious human being, the personality self, is not aware of.
Right.
And yet there are these things that when you reflect back are all leading to this moment, right? You know, for Edgar Cayce, how fascinating it is that his health problems all centered in his throat. Hello, throat chakra.
And he sought out a hypnotist that put him in a hypnotic trance in order to help cure him
Right.
of his severe laryngitis.
Right.
And whenever he was in the trance state, he could speak. And then when he came out of the trance, he couldn't anymore. And so when he was in one of these hypnotic trances where he could speak, he actually brought through a collective of entities that gave him some medical advice on how to heal himself, and that's what happened.
And he played a little cat and mouse game with the collective for a little bit. Because he really was about to do he was going to do...
Well, people were coming to him for medical advice.
And he was like,
I'm
not comfortable. And who can blame him for that? He was at least had integrity enough to be like, I'm not going to make up shit because I don't know if it's going to work or not.
Well,
and
his
if it
whole
doesn't
thing
work,
was like, I don't know what I'm saying.
I don't know what I'm saying.
This was like back in the day when it's not like... this was on YouTube.
Right.
Or someone would, necessarily, someone was having to transcribe what he would say.
Right. Nobody had a recorder out.
And it was it made him feel very uncomfortable to know that he was speaking all of this with no context whatsoever for any of it.
I value authenticity and integrity. And I felt like he had that and wasn't trying to do other things. Now, how people interpreted his work really didn't have anything to do with him.
People kind of got away from wanting him to cure their, illnesses, and he started talking about things like past lives and the physics of the universe.
Because he was accessing that was his whole thing of accessing the Akashic Records.
Right.
He could go in to the Hall of Records, into the Akashic Records, was a reminder we all have an Akash. Our Akash is the entirety of our soul's existence. And when we are not physically incarnated in body, we have access to all of this incredible, we can just tap into it. So we all want to be able to tap into it as much as we fully can while we are embodied. This is always the goal for me. It's always one of many goals besides omnipotence, is to be able to walk into the Akashic Library and pull out a selection and be like, oh, that's who you are. Or, oh, that's what this means. Or, God, no wonder I've had an issue with that. Or, oh, look at that. How funny is it?
But life would be kind of boring if you knew all that at all.
You don't want to know that, but you're also talking to somebody who has no qualms with spoilers or reading the end of a book first.
I know.
So there you go.
I don't understand that. And I also,
if anything,
I just don't get
listeners
I
are
love
always going to get a transparent Marilyn.
I love a surprise.
Well, I do too. Sometimes but you really like surprises, which is so funny because you're probably looking for a little bit of excitement.
I think
in
it's
your
exciting.
Pleiadian life on Earth. It's just a little bit of, a little bit of get you. You like a little bit of get you.
Oh, there's lots of surprises here.
Every day.
Every moment of every day is an opportunity to be surprised.
I did not see that coming. I didn't. Well, I give Edgar Cayce a lot of props, and I see him really as the inception point of beginning to bring forth more of the collective information.
Well, and I would say
spiritual evolution. That was the beginning of giving that big stone a push.
That was not that long ago.
Not really.
And the potential for this collective shift in our consciousness as humanity was known to higher dimensional beings.
Yeah, they knew that this path was coming.
And so, it kind of, for modern day channelers, it did start with Edgar Cayce.
It really did.
Right into Jane Roberts.
If you don't know who Jane Roberts is, we'll have a link of that in our show notes to the Seth Center, and you can read more about Jane and her husband Robert and Seth. Jane was first and foremost a writer. She is a beautiful poet and wrote all kinds of books as Jane. And she was very intrigued with ESP, which, you hardly ever hear anybody they're talking about ESP. If I saw a book and it said ESP on it, I was grabbing it. If I could get it, oh my gosh, extrasensory perception. Yes, this is what I do. How do I do it? How do I hone it? How can I make it better?
And let's not forget that my mom had herself exercised for having ESP, which made it even more intriguing to me. I was like, yes, what is that? It sounds awesome.
I want to do it.
I
want to be able to have
that.
ESP. Of course. So Jane was intrigued. You have to, let me also give you the time frame. This was the early mid 60s. Okay. So we're really on a collective level on the cusp of a major fork in the collective road of, are we going into this age of Aquarius with expansion and harmony and peace? So this was happening. It was on the precipice of all of this stuff really opening up with people.
How old was Jane?
Jane was in her 30s.
Okay.
She wasn't like young. She was 30s. Okay. She was playing around with automatic writing is what was happening in order to refine and hone her ESP skills. And so automatic writing is when I would say and everybody has a different method of how they prepare to get into that state. I would say you're going to get into basically a meditative state, and you got your notebook and your pen. Some people I know have used typewriters. Jane sat down with a notebook and a pencil and just got into the state, and all of this information. And I love the other aspect I love about Jane working with her husband Robert on all of this is that they would have these deep discussions about, okay, well, where is this coming from? What is this about? How did you feel? What does this mean? You know, they were really deconstructing.
Never underestimate the power of a spiritual BFF.
You got to have one. And for them, they were a married couple, but they were really good friends, you know. Her husband, Robert, was an artist, an incredible painter. And so what happened was spontaneously one evening in their upstate New York apartment that they lived in, Seth came through. Now, keep in mind, Jane was this tiny, little, diminutive, little petite woman. Very delicate features, very, very petite, very thin, who was a very... she's got a quiet strength to her, I would say. So Jane was, smoking. She's always had a cigarette in her hand and a cup of coffee or a glass of water. But Seth came through, and her whole body changed and her voice changed in such a dramatic way. There was no denying that you were talking to somebody coming through Jane that was not Jane. And Seth began to lay out the connections with Jane, himself, and Robert. The three of them had lived a life together. So he would refer to Jane as Rupert, and he would refer to Robert as Joseph. And he was Seth. And so it was in this lifetime of them living together and having a life together, and that's how they knew each other. They were three very good friends.
Which in and of itself is, just...
Won't you want your old best friend to channel through you if they could?
It reinforces the concept that we all know to be true, that we find each other time and time again. People, everybody's somebody.
Everybody is somebody. And
everybody in your life that you are connected with,
you look around,
have probably had other
your siblings,
with.
Your friends, your spouses, your
all
partners, your children, your grandparents. People that you seem to have encounters with over and over, or maybe you have met somebody and just have the magnetic is so strong, and you're like, I know you. I feel like I know you. That is your soul, the you of you, and that person's soul really coming through in that moment of recognition. I think when you are at a level of awareness and you've been doing this work and your spiritual path is very important to you, why wouldn't you take that opportunity of being like, out of all of the places we could have incarnated, we found each other. We get to explore that. When Jane met Robert and when they got together.
Oh, yeah, that was a pure soul recognition.
Total soul recognition. Never dated, but had run into each other 4 times and were like... She was the one that knew. She was like, well, you know what? I'm leaving my husband because she was married to somebody else. I'm leaving my husband and I'm going to live by myself, or I'm going to come and live with you. So there you go.
But look at the power of what they got to explore together, honoring that recognition of the past lifetimes that they've had together. I mean, the explorations that they got to have, the connection, the strength of that relationship brought forward some of the best, the most important material that we've ever had.
Robert took dictation by hand of every session and was an impeccable documentarian of the experience. He wrote it out. Eventually, when people started coming, they would make their way to their apartment. They began to do some audio recordings. This was back in the day. Recording shit was expensive. You had to have reel-to-reel tape.
And I remember just from reading it, what I appreciated about his dictation was how he would write little side notes or about like
providing context
about Jane's feeling state at the time, or some things that she said, or what was going on in their life at the time, or details about the room or the people that were there. It made you feel like you were there.
It did, and I really appreciated that as well. I want to share because I think Jane just did an excellent job of describing this. So I'm gonna take you back, and I'm gonna read a quote from Jane because this happened. I'm just gonna go with this. This was a September evening, 1963, and Jane was sitting down, working at her table, doing some writing. Robert was in his studio painting, very, very calm, very just, beautifully mundane evening of them doing their own pursuits. And this is the quote from Jane, and I'm just going to read it as she dictated it. It was a very domestic, very normal, very unpsychedelic moment, she would later remember. And then, between one normal minute and the next, a fantastic avalanche of radical new ideas burst into my head with tremendous force. It was as if the physical world were really tissue paper thin, hiding infinite dimensions of reality, and I was flung through the tissue paper with a huge ripping sound. So, how do you go back from something like that?
Although I think a lot of people do try to run from those kinds of experiences.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. I mean, there's no doubt.
It's only the bravest of the brave that can really kind of surrender to that, to that experience and trust that it's all happening by divine guidance.
When those things are happening and you're acting on something without thinking it, I'm like, that's a moment of embodying your higher self. And your higher self, you've left the show, higher self is taken over for a moment, decisions get made in a nanosecond, and you go forward and you do something. As talking about it just in terms of channeling, Jane literally would describe it as a trance-like state. Present, not present, And that is an example that we would call trance channeling, or the channeling where your whole vessel is just being used as a conduit in that moment to bring that forward.
And it's very taxing physically.
It is very taxing physically,
to
energetically.
Bring forward, to have another vibrational frequency that's not your own inhabiting your body for a short amount of time.
Right. Well,
there's limitations. There's time limitations.
There are. Yeah, you cannot be trance channeling for hours and hours on end. Although, I think that was what part of the issue. Jane also, as a physical being, had horrible, debilitating rheumatoid arthritis. Constantly trying to find ways of improving her health. I think this is very interesting when you think about Edgar Cayce and his health issues, that there are a lot of people that have health issues that this somehow gets activated. I don't think that is there are no coincidences. I don't understand what the design purpose is of that, and I'm not going to know, but I find it an interesting observation to make.
Looking at it and reading about Edgar Cayce, and also from my own experience having health issues, is that when we have some sort of disease process or some physical discomfort or chronic pain or whatever it is, for some people, that is going to open the door to these more unconventional ways of thinking about that. And which is going to, I mean, just like Edgar Cayce agreeing to be put in a hypnotic trance in order to help
You're
him,
willing to try anything when you're desperate. Try anything. Let's just call it what it is.
I mean, we've already talked about that in other episodes.
About it, right.
And how we got into lithotherapy.
Right.
Which led to all these other subtle energy healing modalities. But when you are opening yourself up to that sort of ancient wisdom, it's like you're opening yourself up consciously to the Akash.
Right.
And to other dimensions of reality.
Jane and Seth opened up a huge door because really these books were published. The notoriety began like around 1970, 71. So it's the beginning of the 70s. The collective in this country anyway was very open to a lot of new paradigm shifting. And it was clear in a lot of different areas. I can just recall as growing up in that time period. So you have people that are interested in UFOs, you have people that are interested in psychics, you have people that are interested in this material that Seth brought forward. Those were best-selling books. I mean, people knew who they were. It was kind of phenomenal for that time. But she really blazed the trail. Seth blazed the trail with the material. Jane opened up those doors that allowed other people who were having their own experiences of awakening or beginning to channel other beings or collectives, and some people getting into it very reluctantly, and yet when there is a surrender to the process, everything opens up, So in the years after Jane and Seth, Esther Hicks came through, or she channeled Abraham. Abraham was really a collective that came through her. And she was another person that started with was doing typewriting and having it come forward in a written format and then having this acclamation that needs to happen, I'm sure, right? The being, the non-physical energy entity has got to find a way to calibrate to that physical vessel. It's a partnership, and you got to work at that. And that's what I appreciate. There's another one of a beloved trance channeler who we have recommended his book to many of our clients, and that's Lee Carroll. And he trance channels a collective called Cryon of Magnetic Service. Cryon did a very similar thing in writing a book called The Journey Home that he had channeled through Lee Carroll. And Lee Carroll was a reluctant channeler.
These people paved the way. I mean, literally, we live in a world right now where you can
hang
get on
your shingle up on YouTube and channel Gleep Glop, and you can have a readership and a listenership, and you can get a message out to the world. You're talking about people that would travel around doing workshops, or in the case of Jane and
people
Seth,
need to be sainted.
People made pilgrimages to their tiny ass little apartment. The living room would be full. There would be this massive reel-to-reel recording thing that Rick Stack would bring in. So, by the way, as an aside, Rick Stack, who was a student of Seth and Jane and was one of the young kids from New York City coming up to sit in their apartment, he started recording that, and he helps operate the Seth Center, and he has given tirelessly of himself to make sure this information and all of her recordings. That was a beautiful gift to give. Like, you can get on there. We really like when people support, and you can buy all of those books on their website, and you're supporting the work that they do by preserving. However, what I think is really cool, all of the Seth material, all of Jane's works are housed in the library at Yale. That's where all of the original collections are.
Wow.
I know. She gifted that, and they took it. If you're right there around Yale, you can go in there and pop in the library.
Wow, that would be really cool.
And check that out.
That makes me want to go there now. I mean, are they typed up? Or are they handwritten?
Yeah, all of Robert's notes. Yeah,
what about all of her automatic writings and stuff?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know how extensive the collection is, but I know the books are all there.
Wow.
Maybe somebody can, feel free if you want to go down that little hole of inquiry.
Any listeners around Yale, please go there.
Yeah, go check out to see the Jane Roberts.
Please go there.
Collection, because it's all there.
So we can live vicariously through you.
I know. It would be really, really awesome.
One thing that I appreciated about Seth is a lot of channeled information is coming from extraterrestrial beings.
Right.
Or collectives of extraterrestrial beings, or collectives of high dimensional beings that have never been human. They've never been a human being.
You bring up a really
Earth.
good point. That's a really good point, and I had kind of forgot about it.
And Seth was a human being. He had many human lives.
It is, because the higher dimensionally you are, the more removed you are from the human physical experience, and there's a lot to be said of having had it and know the complexities and the density and the heaviness of having been in a third dimensional reality, and the duality of love and fear and having all of these just human elements, human experiences, human emotions. I really appreciate it when I'm hearing somebody who is channeling somebody who actually is a little bit closer to my density, and that or at least they can tap into that existence. Mm-hmm. I think it's important for everybody to remember what we would call conscious channeling, which is, you're fully aware of your surroundings. You're fully present, and you have not stepped aside. Your body has not been is not being utilized by that non-physical entity, but you're receiving messages through visual imagery, through thought forms from a non-physical entity, collective reality. These messages can be written down, they can be spoken out loud. And when you're conscious channeling, keep in mind, there is a different type of filter and lens that comes through. Because you are not stepped aside, things are going to kind of come through your own personality self's lenses, belief, your framework, and things like that. That's why discernment is really key in everything. For you as the recipient of the information, as you as the listener, even with yourself.
Just because something's channeled doesn't mean it's the end all be all.
No, if it's not coming from a place of the highest good for all, that's not the type of information that a higher dimensional or extra dimensional being that is a service to others is going to be giving you, So discernment is really important. And, there's other levels to that. Let's say there are different aspects of conscious channeling. There's empathic interfacing, downloading. Mm-hmm. It was downloaded. I don't know. It was just downloaded into me. It was just like placed inside my awareness. Mm-hmm. I did not seek it out. This information, this vision, whatever it was, this auditory message.
There's no way that I could know this. This did not come from me. It just got inserted into my consciousness. Like you have the knowing, but you get to explore all these concepts as yourself from your own perspective, and how does this make sense to me, and how does this change the way that I see the world, and how does this fit into me as my personality self and how I see the world.
I think everybody receives downloads, and what they do with the information is entirely up to them of how they are recognizing it. And so if these things are happening and it's in the moment and you're like, where did that come from? Well, document it. Pay attention to it. Explore it. Just like you were talking about. You want to unpack that information. But we also, what we would say, is receive information during a daydream state or the dream state. Oh my gosh,
yes.
Or a deeply meditative state. And that is valid information. And you really benefit, we all do, when we are paying attention to how it made us feel. What did we get triggered by? Or I knew this to be true. This is still, we would say, this is all channeled information. Once again, I want to be able to go into a deeply meditative state and go into the Akashic Library and read all about my Akash, or having that awareness of knowing my some of my soul's experiences.
And some people can do it spontaneously without even wanting to do it. And some people, it's about honing those intuitive skills. It's about following a level of excitement, because anytime you are excited about something, it has a lot of momentum and kind of clears a path for that to be more accessible. Yeah.
It's like getting a turbo boost. You know, it's like when you're excited, you're turbo boosting your endeavor in all things, but especially when you're doing this type of work.
Why are channeled messages important to us as human beings?
Well, I would say on a basic level, it's probably because we feel like there's some degree of a larger knowing or awareness because you're not in the physical. It's something that we have in our consciousness. It is a knowing that we have in our physical vessels on a genetic level. And we seek that which we cannot see with our own physical senses. And yet we have been brought up and conditioned to distrust and to be disconnected from these abilities that we all have. And channeling is no different than that everybody has the ability to access that. And so I think that people are attracted and seek it out because they know that there's truth there to be found, maybe, or answer.
And I mean, I liken it to being in the middle of the woods as opposed to climbing up, to the highest limb of a tree and having the vantage point,
exactly.
the higher perspective of the totality of everything that's going on, that we can't see. And certainly as humans, we do feel like we are not getting the whole picture.
Because we know it to be true in our heart, right? We know it to be true.
There's something that is eluding us. And especially with these big channelers, like we mentioned, these people, I mean, you can read them, so many different sources, so many different channelers, so many different entities being channeled, and yet the information is universally true. These are things about fundamental principles of the universe,
the
and
mechanics
how
of it,
consciousness works, and how we are creating our own reality, and how that works. And oversouls and higher selves and incarnations and time and space and all of these concepts that can be a lot to take in, but it certainly, I think is very helpful to sorting out your own life as your own personality self.
Right. And therefore, I think it's a really powerful tool. It's a part of ourselves that we have to work at to hone.
Sometimes I know that when I hear some really high dimensional, channeled information, and I know the truth of it, and I'm always trying to, when I'm hearing channeled information that resonates with me deeply, and I know the truth of it, I'm like, how am I grounding this information into my human experience? How does that translate? How do I apply this?
Well, and how does that reconcile with my actual living life as me, as Melissa in this life, or me as Marilyn? And I got to deal with this, and I got to deal with that, and I have these relationships, and I'm a mom, and I got to take care of my mother. And how do I ride that and integrate it and bring it into my life?
But I think that's the whole point.
It is the whole point, right?
I mean, it's like we get to merge that higher wisdom with our human experience and become something new and become changed because of it, and we can create something that's new and different and better, hopefully, with those new awarenesses.
Well, and you don't know what's going to unfold when you embark upon a path of trying to be consciously aware of being a conduit of this type of information. And being open to these energies. It goes back to what we were talking about with the 11 steps, right? You want to be able to be doing all of those things in order to be able to be in a place to then embark upon, okay, now I got to take it to the next level. And the next level is I'm going to actually do a concerted effort on learning how to channel my own information in a way that I receive it with complete clarity And I get to then take it and unpack it for myself and understand it in the context of who I am and my life and my experience and in my totality.
Well, and this is why we put together the 11 steps, because everybody has access to this information.
Right.
Everybody
We have
has
transcended
access.
from the paradigm that you have to go through some hierarchical structure. There is no one that is going to be able to interpret your experience better than you.
So I think that what most people really want to know is, how do I channel my higher self? How can I get information from the higher aspect of my own consciousness? And to that, we're always going to recommend getting into a deep meditative state. Ask for that guidance and just allow whatever information is going to come into your awareness to just present itself with no expectations of any outcomes. I think that when you're starting to play around with these concepts, it can be really easy to have an idea of how that should happen for you, based on how you've seen it unfold for other people. And you really need to just allow, because you have your own unique gifts and you are your own unique person, and how what's right for the way that you receive information is going to be unique to you. And so just allowing information to come through, whether it's through writing, imagery, words, feeling states, downloads, or dreams. Sometimes you can't put a timeline on it. I might be struggling with something and I need some clarity, and I do my stuff and I do my practices and I get in my aligned state, and I'm, asking, and I'm trusting, and I'm surrendering, and nothing happens. And in fact, I might be in such a deep meditative state that I wake up like 20 minutes later. Then I'll go to sleep that night and I'll have all of this dream recall that basically is answering my question. It's giving me the guidance that I need. So, don't put any limitations on how this information or when it is going to come to you. And try not to have any frustration. It's hugely important in order to be a clear channel and for information to be running through you, to not have any resistance to receiving that information.
Right. There are many consciousness exercises that you can find online to help with your endeavors. However, if you really want to take it to the next level, I would recommend taking a channeling class. But before you do that, give yourself the opportunity of doing this work on your own. Because when you're able to do it on your own, or if you have a friend or a group of people that this is like you get to hang out and talk about these things, then you can kind of begin to work with each other, and I think that's always really cool. But this is stuff that you can do on your own, at your own pace, like Melissa said, no expectations. And don't get frustrated. And just because you're doing something and you're putting all this effort and you don't feel like you're really receiving anything, you are. And it is going to come out. And when you have that, things are going to unfold even more obviously, with more clarity. And you just have to, once again, as with all things, trust the process. Trust the process.
It takes practice. For most people, it takes practice.
And we had to practice at it, and we had to hone it. This can really elevate your life in so many profound ways. It certainly has for us, for our own journey, our own healing, our own awareness. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today in this episode about channeling. There's an incredible array of information out there. There are amazing channelers. You're probably already tapped into some right now that you like to listen to or stay up with. But really, from my perspective, this is all about for people to feel like they have the power to do this work themselves. And to give a little bit more context, because a lot of the people that we're going to be talking to down the road are people that are channelers, because we find their life's work amazing, and we want to be able to have conversations with them about that work. So you can visit our website for the show notes and the links to the resources and the channelers we've talked about today. And as always, we're eternally grateful that you joined us for another episode of the Be the Light podcast. We really appreciate everybody who takes the time to listen to us and our fun explorations. And if you really like what you're listening to, we are always grateful for your support by subscribing to our podcast. And if you really dig it or you really resonate or however you feel about it, we always appreciate a review.
We're really happy that you were listening wherever you are and whenever you are. We love you. Be the Light podcast is produced by Teal Hobson Lowther. Our amazing theme music was lovingly created by Frequency Jones. Visit our website, BeTheLightRocks.com. Stay woke, y'all.
But don't you